It turns out that if you were happier afterwards, it wasn't because I was singing, because I know how I sound when I'm singing, and it wasn't just because I was clapping my hands, it was because we were doing it. It was because we were doing it together. And that is of the essence of the research I'm going to be talking about tonight and tomorrow. It won't come through as strongly tonight as tomorrow, because tonight I'm stuck with talking about global data, where we have some very nice data, but incomplete, from the Gallup World Poll. 1,000 people in 140 countries for 3 years. I will show you how happy people are all over the world, and I will show you some of the key factors that explain differences in happiness. But the Gallup poll is missing much of what's really important in life, the kinds of things the Prime Minister was talking about, the social connections that are important in communities and in people's lives. The more data we get on people's connections, the more we find of their happiness that depends on them. So it'll be a truncated picture tonight, but important to see because it gets at some of the key issues. May I have my first slide, please? And the second. And the next. I'm going to... Aha. You've already heard talk tonight about the Sarkozy report. As you may remember, if you've read it, there were essentially 3 parts to that report. The first was about measuring GDP better. But if you measure GDP better, it's still GDP. The second part was about broader measures of well-being. And the third was about sustainability. These conferences today are about the link, today and this week, are about the link between well-being and sustainability. And I'm going to try and give you a bit of the evidence that shows that link. When I first started doing research on this question, I described myself as Aristotle's research assistant. Because when he laid out those factors that made a good life, and he said, you know, if you want to find out what is a good life, you should ask people in a reflective mood to look at their life as a whole and assess it for you. And he listed a number of factors that led to a better life. And then he said at the end, if these factors do not pass the test of the world, then they are as nothing. He didn't have any data then. We now have data. So I was able to set myself up as Aristotle's research assistant. And I can report to you that he did very well. He got no data in hand, very close to the fundamentals. If you've been following your classic philosophy, you'll remember how he situated himself at the golden mean between the Epicureans on one hand, for whom pleasure was it, and the Stoics on the other hand, for whom doing the right thing was everything. Aristotle said he could not imagine a thoughtful person having a really happy life if they did not embrace both, the sufficiency to support their existence and the doing the right thing on the other hand. And indeed, I think he is correct. On a second point, how do capabilities fit in? That is something that's arisen more recently. Amartya Sen, among others, has argued you may find people in countries who are very happy but very impoverished in a lot of human dimensions. And he said it's because they don't know better. What's important, Amartya Sen says, is that people should have capabilities. Well, I have good news for you. If you believe in subjective well-being, and you believe in Amartya Sen, he was right that capabilities are enormously important. Indeed, they show up very strongly in people's own assessments of the quality of their lives. Which means he was wrong on the other count. The fact that capabilities matter does not render subjective evaluations useless. On the contrary, we find those countries where capabilities are restricted are just those countries that they themselves report themselves low in their qualities of life. Finally, or next, there's a question about the distinction between positive emotions and negative emotions. Many of our social sciences and our medical sciences, health sciences, criminology, justice is all about waiting until something goes wrong and then trying to fix it. Only recently has psychology got around the 95% of the articles about depression, the other 5% about positive states of mind, to saying surely what's important is to think about what's required to build and support those positive states of mind, since the research, and Susan will be giving some of her results on this, I know, show us that in fact those people with positive states of mind fend off illnesses better, they suffer less in a number of dimensions, much more so than is the case with the absence of negative emotions. So to simply get rid of problems and replace people in a situation of stasis is not good enough. What's important is to think and provide those aspects of life that build those positive states of mind. G&H once again. There's another downside that people have said about the use of subjective measures of well-being, that in fact people are comparative and that in fact they can adapt to circumstances. In fact, most recent research is showing that in fact, although adaptation, which is very helpful, right? You want to be able to reorganize your life if something bad happens to you and make the best of a bad thing. Nonetheless, those people who are in worse life circumstances, even after their full adjustment periods, are systematically worse off than those in better circumstances. Relativities matter most, as the Prime Minister said much better than I could, matter most in material things. In non-material things, such as trust and connections with others, people do not have that same situation. In fact, people who have trusting neighbors become more trusting themselves. People who have happy neighbors are happier themselves. If you want an example, here's a crude one I sometimes give. Do you know a rude gesture in traffic that's called a finger in English? It's a bras d'honneur in Quebec. I don't know what it is in Brazil. But when one of those is delivered in traffic, both the giver and the receiver go home less happy at the end of that day. The alternative, which I'm told is the norm in small communities, is the wave in traffic. The waver goes home happier at the end of the day, as does the person who has received the wave. That tells you something about the positive feedbacks from positive social interactions. Are these measures reliable and are they predictive? I'm going to tell you they are, because I'm now on to my next picture. This picture shows you all the countries of the world, 140 of them, showing their average levels of life satisfaction. It's actually a Cantrell ladder of life, with 0 as the worst possible and 10 as the best possible. It's a little different from life satisfaction. Since it tells the same story, and we have it, I'm going to show it to you. The highest countries in the world are in the range of, in this measure, 7 to 8. The worst countries in the world, the red ones, are in a range of 3 to 4. There are no people there having high average greens that are countries that you would think of as well off in any of these economic and social supports that are there. I'm going to now show you the next picture, which is income per capita. Now that has a rather similar appearance. In fact, it's the similarity of, let me go back and forth with that. I'm going back to how is your life today, and now this is GDP per capita.